Development Through the Lifespan by Laura E. Berk, 7th edition. Chapter 1. History, Theory, and Research Strategies. What's ahead in Chapter 1? A scientific, applied, and interdisciplinary field. Basic issues. Continuous or discontinuous development. One course of development or many. Relative influence of nature and nurture. The lifespan perspective. A balanced point of view. Development is lifelong. Development is multidimensional and multidirectional. Development is plastic. Development is influenced by multiple interacting forces. Biology and environment, such as resilience. Cultural influences. The baby boomers reshape the life course. Scientific beginnings. Darwin, forefather of scientific child study. The normative period. The mental testing movement. Mid-20th century theories. The psychoanalytic perspective. Behaviorism and social learning theory. Piaget's cognitive developmental theory. Recent theoretical perspectives. Information processing. Developmental neuroscience. Ethology and evolutionary developmental psychology. Vygotsky's sociocultural theory. Ecological systems theory. Social issues, health. Family chaos undermines parents' and children's well-being. Comparing and evaluating theories, studying development. Common research methods. General research designs. Designs for studying development. Cultural influences. Immigrant youths adapting to a new land. Ethics in lifespan research. Sophie Lenchner was born in 1908, the second child of Jewish parents who made their home in Leipzig, Germany, a city of thriving commerce and cultural vitality. Her father was a successful businessman and community leader. Her mother a socialite well known for her charm, beauty, and hospitality. As a baby, Sophie displayed a determination and persistence that would be sustained throughout her life. She sat for long periods inspecting small objects with her eyes and hands. The single event that consistently broke her gaze was the sound of the piano in the parlor. As soon as Sophie could crawl, she steadfastly pulled herself up to finger its keys and marveled at the tinkling sounds. By the time Sophie entered elementary school, she was an introspective child, often ill at ease at the festive parties that girls of her family's social standing were expected to attend. She immersed herself in schoolwork, especially in mastering foreign languages, a regular part of German elementary and secondary education. Twice a week she took piano lessons from the finest teacher in Leipzig. By the time Sophie graduated from high school, she spoke English and French fluently and had become an accomplished pianist. Whereas most German girls of her time married by age 20, Sophie postponed serious courtship in favor of entering university. Her parents began to wonder whether their intense, studious daughter would ever settle into family life. Sophie wanted marriage as well as education, but her plans were thwarted by the political turbulence of her times. When Hitler rose to power in the early 1930s, Sophie's father, fearing for the safety of his wife and children, moved the family to Belgium. Conditions for Jews in Europe quickly worsened. The Nazis plundered Sophie's family home and confiscated her father's business. By the end of the 1930s, Sophie had lost contact with all but a handful of her aunts, uncles, cousins, and childhood friends, many of whom, she later learned, were herded into cattle cars and transported to Nazi death camps. In 1939, as anti-Jewish laws and atrocities intensified, Sophie's family fled to the United States. As Sophie turned 30, her parents, convinced that she would never marry and would need a career for financial security, agreed to support her return to school. Sophie earned 2 master's degrees, one in music and the other in librarianship. Then, on a blind date, she met Philip, a U.S. Army officer. Philip's calm, gentle nature complemented Sophie's intensity and worldliness. Within 6 months, they married. During the next 4 years, 2 daughters and a son were born. When World War II ended, Philip left the army and opened a small men's clothing store. Sophie divided her time between caring for the children and helping Philip in the store. Now, in her 40s, she was a devoted mother, but few women her age were still rearing young children. As Philip struggled with the business, he spent longer hours at work, and Sophie often felt lonely. She rarely touched the piano, which brought back painful memories of youthful life plans shattered by war. Sophie's sense of isolation and lack of fulfillment frequently left her short-tempered. Late at night, she and Philip could be heard arguing. As Sophie's children grew older, she returned to school again, this time earning a teaching credential. Finally, at age 50, she launched a career teaching German and French to high school students and English to newly arrived immigrants. Beside easing her family's financial difficulties, she felt a gratifying sense of accomplishment and creativity. These years were among the most energetic and satisfying of Sophie's life. She had an unending enthusiasm for teaching, for transmitting her facility with language, her first-hand knowledge of the consequences of hatred and oppression, and her practical understanding of how to adapt to life in a new land. She watched her children, whose young lives were free of the trauma of war, adopt many of her values and commitments and begin their marital and vocational lives at the expected time. Sophie approached age 60 with an optimistic outlook. Released from the financial burden of paying for her children's college education, she and Philip looked forward to greater leisure. Their affection and respect for each other deepened. Once again, Sophie began to play the piano. But this period of contentment was short-lived. One morning, Sophie awoke and felt a hard lump under her arm. Several days later, her doctor diagnosed cancer. Sophie's spirited disposition and capacity to adapt to radical life changes helped her meet the illness head-on. She defined it as an enemy to be fought and overcome. As a result, she lived 5 more years. Despite the exhaustion of chemotherapy, Sophie maintained a full schedule of teaching duties and continued to visit and run errands for her aging mother. But as she weakened physically, she no longer had the stamina to meet her classes. Bedridden for the last few weeks, she slipped quietly into debt with Philip at her side. The funeral chapel overflowed with hundreds of Sophie's students. One of Sophie's 3 children, Laura, is the author of this book. Married a year before Sophie died, Laura and her husband Ken often think of Sophie's message, spoken privately on the eve of their wedding day. I learned from my own life and marriage that you must build a life together, but also a life apart. You must grant each other the time, space, and support to forge your own identities, your own ways of expressing yourselves and giving to others. The most important ingredient of your relationship must be respect. Laura and Ken settled in a small Midwestern city near Illinois State University, where they served on the faculty for many years. Laura in the Department of Psychology, Ken in the Department of Mathematics. They have 2 sons, David and Peter, to whom Laura has related many stories about Sophie's life and who carry her legacy forward. David shares his grandmother's penchant for teaching. He is a 3rd grade teacher. Peter, a lawyer, shares a love of music, and his wife Melissa, much like Sophie, is both a talented linguist and a musician. When Peter asked Melissa to marry him, he placed a family heirloom on her finger, an engagement ring that had belonged to Sophie's aunt, who perished in a Nazi death camp. In the box that held the ring, Melissa found a written copy of the story of Sophie and her family. Sophie also had a lifelong impact on many of her students. A professor of human development wrote to Laura, "I teach a class in lifespan development. When I opened the textbook and saw the pictures of your mother, I was very surprised. I took high school German classes from her. I remember her as a very tough teacher who both held her students accountable and cared about each and every one of us. That she was an incredible teacher did not really sink in until I went to Germany during my college years and was able to both understand German and speak it." Sophie's story raises a wealth of fascinating issues about human life histories. What determines the features that Sophie shares with others and those that make her unique? In physical characteristics, mental capacities, interests, and behaviors. What led Sophie to retain the same persistent, determined disposition through her life, but to change in other essential ways? How do historical and cultural conditions, for Sophie, the persecution that destroyed her childhood home, caused the death of family members and friends, and led her family to flee to the United States, affect well-being throughout life? How does the timing of events, for example, Sophie's early exposure to multiple languages and her delayed entry into marriage, parenthood, and career, affect development? What factors, both genetic and environmental, led Sophie to die sooner than expected? These are central questions addressed by developmental science, a field of study devoted to understanding constancy and change throughout the lifespan. Great diversity characterize the interests and concerns of investigators who study development, but all share a single goal: to identify those factors that influence consistencies and transformations in people from conception to death.